The Crystal Ember was one of the most exclusive fine dining restaurants in Los Angeles, a place where the city's richest and most powerful gathered to indulge in extravagant meals and bask in their own status. Lavish chandeliers cast golden light over the pristine white tablecloths, and the scent of truffle risotto and aged wine filled the air. To dine here, one needed connections, wealth, or an outrageous amount of luck. It was a playground for the elite, where every guest expected nothing but perfection. Tonight, the restaurant was bustling. Hollywood producers, tech billionaires, and socialites filled the room. The waitstaff moved swiftly and elegantly, catering to their every need. At one table, however, sat a man who didn't quite fit the usual mold. Dressed in a simple black t-shirt, jeans, and a baseball cap, Tom Cruise sat alone at a corner table, quietly studying the menu. No entourage, no flashy jewelry, no air of arrogance. Just a man looking forward to a good meal. To the untrained eye, he looked ordinary. Maybe a tourist who had somehow managed to get a reservation. Someone unimportant. And that's exactly how Nathan Parker, one of the restaurant's senior waiters, saw him. Nathan was the kind of man who measured worth in dollar signs. If a guest didn't arrive in a designer suit or dripping in expensive watches, they were nobody in his eyes. He had built a reputation for catering only to VIPs and treating anyone else with thinly veiled disdain. When he approached Tom's table, he didn't bother to hide his condescension. "Good evening, sir," Nathan said in a flat tone, barely looking at him. "Are you sure you have a reservation?" Tom looked up from his menu, a small smile forming on his lips. "Yeah. The name's Tom." Nathan pursed his lips. No last name? No confidence? This guy was definitely out of place. He sighed. "We have a strict dress code here," he said, eyeing Tom's casual attire. "Usually, we don't seat people dressed like—" He hesitated, waving a hand toward Tom's simple outfit as if it were offensive. "That?" Tom raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I didn't see anything about a dress code when I booked." Nathan let out a quiet scoff. "Well, sir, we make exceptions for our regular guests. But for others we expect a certain standard." Tom noticed the way Nathan emphasized the word others. He wasn't just being questioned, he was being dismissed. A few nearby guests turned their heads, sensing tension. But Nathan didn't care. In his mind, this was just another random nobody who had gotten lucky with a reservation. What he didn't realize, what would soon turn his world upside down, was that the man he was insulting didn't just have a reservation. He owned the entire restaurant. And soon, Nathan was going to regret every single word. Nathan tapped his polished dress shoes against the marble floor, resisting the urge to roll his eyes. The Crystal Ember was reserved for the elite, the crème de la crème, not for men who looked like they had just strolled in from a grocery store. He had spent years perfecting his ability to spot true wealth and influence at first glance. And this man, he screamed out of place nobody. "Look," Nathan said, lowering his voice as if doing Tom a favor. "This restaurant caters to a certain clientele. Our guests expect a level of refinement." His eyes flickered to Tom's plain black t-shirt before he added, "Perhaps a more casual place would be a better fit for you." Tom tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "You're saying I don't belong here?" Nathan smiled politely, but his tone dripped with condescension. "I'm saying you might be more comfortable somewhere less exclusive." Across the room, a group of wealthy guests chuckled over champagne, their voices a mix of arrogance and self-importance. The kind of people Nathan loved serving, because their wallets were as big as their egos. Nathan's instinct told him this man was a waste of time, the kind of customer who would probably leave a pathetic tip, if he even tipped at all. Tom glanced around the restaurant, his eyes scanning the chandeliers, the white glove service, the neatly folded napkins. He seemed to take it all in, but unlike other guests, he didn't look odd or intimidated. If anything, he looked amused. Nathan, growing impatient, sighed and checked his expensive watch. "Listen, sir, if you insist on dining here, I suppose we can seat you. But our premium tables are reserved for our VIP guests. You understand, of course." Tom leaned back in his chair, still watching Nathan with an expression that made the waiter uneasy. "VIP guests?" Tom asked, curiosity in his voice. Nathan nodded, puffing out his chest slightly. "Yes, We take great care of our most valuable patrons. For example, he gestured across the room toward a table of well-dressed executives. That gentleman over there is a major real estate mogul. The man to his left owns half the luxury hotels in Beverly Hills. And that woman? Nathan smirked. She has a net worth in the billions. Tom nodded slowly, as if processing this information. So, you only respect people if they're rich? He asked. Nathan let out a small, dismissive laugh. Not just rich, sir. People with power. Influence. The kind of people who matter. The moment the words left his mouth, Nathan saw something shift in Tom's expression. A flicker of something sharp and knowing. But instead of responding, Tom simply smiled. A quiet, calm smile. Nathan had no idea that the man he was looking down on was the most powerful person in this entire building. And soon, he was about to find out just how badly he had messed up. Nathan gave Tom one last patronizing look before sighing dramatically. Fine, he said. I'll find you a table. But don't expect our best service. We have to prioritize our real clients. Without waiting for a response, he turned sharply, motioning for a junior waiter to escort Tom to a table near the kitchen. It was the worst spot in the restaurant, too close to the swinging doors, where waiters rushed in and out carrying trays of expensive wine and gourmet dishes. Tom followed without protest, calmly taking his seat. The junior waiter, a nervous young man named Ben, placed a menu in front of him, clearly uncomfortable with the way Nathan had treated the guest. Sir, can I get you something to drink? Ben asked hesitantly. Tom gave him a friendly smile. Just water, please. Ben nodded and hurried away, while Nathan smirked from across the room. In his mind, this was exactly where Tom belonged. Out of sight, out of mind. But Nathan wasn't done humiliating him just yet. The arrogance grows a few minutes later. As Tom sipped his water, Nathan approached the table again, this time carrying a wine menu. We have an exquisite selection of wines, Nathan said, placing the menu in front of Tom. But he let out a small laugh. I assume you're looking for something more affordable? Tom raised an eyebrow. What makes you think that? Nathan shrugged, feigning innocence. Just a hunch. Most of our guests order wines that start at around $3,000 a bottle. But of course I can find something cheaper for you. Across the room, another table of VIP guests laughed as a waiter poured their wine. Nathan glanced toward them, then leaned in just slightly. I mean, you probably wouldn't know the difference anyway, right? He said, grinning smugly. Tom set his glass down. For the first time, Nathan felt a shift in the air. There was something different about the way Tom looked at him now. The patience was still there, but beneath it something else. Something controlled, measured, powerful. Nathan cleared his throat and took a step back, suddenly feeling like he had pushed too far. I'll just give you a few moments, he said quickly, before turning away. As he walked off, a strange feeling crept into his chest. For the first time since he started working at the Crystal Ember, Nathan felt like he might have miscalculated. A growing unease at the other end of the restaurant, Ben, the junior waiter, had been watching everything. He wasn't like Nathan. He didn't believe in treating people differently just because of their appearance. And something about the way Tom handled himself, it didn't fit. If this man was really just some random customer, why did he seem so in control? Ben hesitated before walking over to Nathan, speaking in a low voice. Hey, don't you think you're being a little harsh on that guy? Nathan scoffed. What, the guy in the hoodie? Please. He's nobody. Just some low-level producer or washed-up actor trying to feel important. Ben frowned. But what if you're wrong? Nathan rolled his eyes. I'm never wrong about people, kid. Trust me, this guy's not anyone special. But as Nathan turned back toward Tom's table, he noticed something odd. One of the head chefs had stepped out of the kitchen and was whispering to the restaurant manager. Both of them were looking toward Tom, and the manager's face had suddenly gone pale. Nathan's stomach twisted. What the hell is going on? He muttered. Ben, standing beside him, noticed too. I think you're about to find out. Because at that moment, the restaurant manager suddenly turned and started walking directly toward Tom's table. Nathan's smirk vanished. Nathan's confidence began to waver as the restaurant manager, Daniel Reed, hurried toward Tom's table, his face pale and beads of sweat forming at his temples. Daniel had been working at the Crystal Ember for years. He had handled celebrities, billionaires, and even royalty. But the expression on his face now? That was pure panic. Nathan froze in place, watching as Daniel reached Tom's table. The manager bowed slightly, his voice suddenly filled with respect and urgency. "Mr. Cruz," he said. I had no idea you were dining with us tonight. Please forgive the oversight." Nathan's stomach twisted. "Mr. Cruz? Tom Cruise? As in the Tom Cruise?" Nathan's breath caught in his throat. His body tensed, his mind scrambling to process what he had just heard. Tom smiled politely, tilting his head. "No problem, Daniel. Just enjoying a quiet dinner." Daniel swallowed hard. "Sir, had I known you were coming, we would have prepared a private dining experience for you. Should I have our staff relocate you to a more suitable table?" Nathan felt his heart drop. Private dining experience? That's when it hit him. This wasn't just some regular celebrity visiting the restaurant. Tom Cruise wasn't just a guest. He owned the damn place. The realization sent a wave of nausea through Nathan's body. His hands felt clammy, and for the first time in his career, he felt small. Nathan watched as Tom leaned back slightly in his chair, his expression still calm. Too calm. "Actually," Tom said, glancing toward Nathan, "I'm kind of curious about something." Daniel nodded immediately. "Of course, sir. Anything." Tom picked up his glass of water, swirled it slightly, then looked straight at Nathan. "Tell me, Daniel," he said, "do we treat our guests differently based on how they dress?" The entire restaurant fell silent. Nathan's face went white. Daniel hesitated, then quickly shook his head. "No, sir. We pride ourselves on giving every guest the highest level of service, regardless of appearance." Tom raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" Nathan's legs felt weak. He wanted to disappear into the floor. Daniel finally noticed the way Tom was looking at Nathan. His gaze sharpened, and something clicked in his mind. "Wait." Daniel turned toward Nathan. "What happened?" Nathan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Tom gave him a chance to speak, a chance to admit what he had done. But Nathan, he was too terrified. Silence stretched on for too long. And that silence, it spoke louder than any excuse ever could. The VIP guests take notice across the room. Some of the wealthy guests who had laughed earlier were now whispering. "Wait, is that actually Tom Cruise?" "No way. That's him." "Oh, this is bad. That waiter is screwed." Nathan felt their stares. The same rich guests he had tried to impress were now looking at him with pity. He had spent years chasing power and influence, only to humiliate himself in front of the most powerful person in the room. Ben steps in at that moment. Ben, the junior waiter, stepped forward. He cleared his throat, nervous but determined. Sir," Ben said, looking at Tom. "I just wanted to say, I thought it was unfair how you were treated. Not everyone here acts like that." Tom's expression softened. "I appreciate that." Ben hesitated, then glanced at Nathan. He could have stayed quiet. He could have let Nathan take the fall alone. But he didn't. "Also," Ben swallowed, "Nathan told me you weren't worth his time." The room gasped. Daniel's eyes widened. His jaw clenched. Nathan felt like he had been punched in the gut. "Ben," Nathan started, but his voice was weak. Tom didn't react with anger. Instead, he just nodded, like he had already known. The moment of judgment, Daniel turned back to Nathan, his voice ice cold. "Get in my office. Now." Nathan felt his legs shake. His career, his reputation, everything was falling apart in real time. He had spent his life looking down on others. And now he was the one being judged. As he walked away, Nathan felt the weight of every mistake he had made. And deep down he knew, this wasn't just a bad night. This was the beginning of his downfall. Nathan's legs felt heavy as he followed Daniel into the back office. The laughter, the murmurs, the weight of his humiliation still rang in his ears. His mind raced, grasping for a way out. Maybe I can talk my way through this. Maybe I can apologize and act like it was all a misunderstanding. But deep down he knew, there was no saving this. Daniel slammed the office door behind them, his face hard and unreadable. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. And somehow that was worse. "I need you to explain," Daniel said, his voice cold. "Right now." Nathan swallowed. "Daniel, listen, it was just a misunderstanding. Daniel held up a hand. Stop. Nathan shut his mouth. Daniel leaned forward, hands on the desk. Do you have any idea, he said slowly, what you've done? Nathan hesitated. It was a mistake. Daniel's eyes flashed. A mistake, he repeated, shaking his head. Nathan, you didn't just insult a customer. You insulted the owner of this restaurant. Nathan clenched his jaw. I didn't know. And whose fault is that? Daniel snapped. Nathan had no answer. Daniel exhaled sharply and ran a hand through his hair. I need to call corporate, he muttered. Nathan's heart pounded. Wait, corporate? Daniel nodded stiffly. Tom Cruise owns this restaurant. He's part of the investment group behind the Crystal Ember and several other fine dining establishments. Nathan felt his throat tighten. Corporate wasn't just a manager or a regional director. Corporate meant the owners, the investors, and worst of all, Tom himself. Please, Nathan blurted out. Give me a chance to fix this. Daniel gave him a long, measured look. Fix it, he said bitterly. Nathan, how do you plan on fixing this? Do you think Tom Cruise is just going to forget how you treated him? Nathan's face burned. He could still hear the gasps from the guests, the whispers, the way Ben had stepped forward to expose everything. Nathan hesitated. Daniel crossed his arms. I should fire you right now, he said bluntly. Nathan's stomach dropped. You spent years treating people like they were beneath you, Daniel continued, shaking his head. And now, the one person you look down on turns out to be the most powerful man in the room. Nathan swallowed hard. Because Daniel was right. And now, it was too late to take it back. Meanwhile, in the dining room, back at his table, Tom calmly finished his meal. The restaurant was still buzzing, half in awe, half in tension. Ben, still nervous, hesitated before stepping toward the table. Mr. Cruise, can I get you anything else? Tom smiled. No, Ben. You've done great tonight. Ben relaxed slightly. Then hesitating, he said, I just wanted to say, I really respect how you handled that. You could have, Tom chuckled, nodding. I could have made a scene. Ben nodded quickly. Yeah, most celebrities would have. Tom set his napkin down, his expression thoughtful. There's no point in yelling, he said. People like Nathan don't need to be shouted at. They need to be shown why they're wrong. Ben let those words sink in. Then nervously he asked, Are you gonna fire him? Tom leaned back, considering. Firing him is the easy way out, he said. But maybe there's something better. Ben's eyes widened. Like what? Tom smiled, but this time, there was something sharp behind it. Let's just say, I have an idea. And as the restaurant staff watched in anticipation, Tom Cruise prepared to deliver a lesson that Nathan Parker would never forget. Nathan sat stiffly in the office chair, his hands clenched into fists beneath the table. He could feel the weight of his mistakes pressing down on him like a storm cloud ready to break. Daniel sat across from him, his phone in hand, fingers hovering over the screen. I should be calling corporate right now, Daniel muttered. Nathan swallowed hard. He was about to lose everything. But before Daniel could dial, the office door swung open. Tom Cruise stepped inside. Nathan jerked upright. The room suddenly felt too small. Daniel jumped to his feet. Mr. Cruise, Tom held up a hand. Relax, Daniel, he said calmly. Then he turned his gaze on Nathan. Nathan's mouth felt dry. The humiliation from the dining floor still burned on his skin. But this was worse. Because now, he had to face Tom directly. Tom sat down in the chair across from him, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. He didn't look angry. He didn't look vengeful. He looked disappointed. And somehow that stung more. So, Tom said, breaking the silence. You've got quite an interesting way of treating guests. Nathan licked his lips. Sir, I didn't know who you were. Tom tilted his head. So, if I had been someone else, your behavior would have been okay? Nathan froze. That was the moment he realized there was no excuse. Tom leaned back, shaking his head. Nathan, I could fire you. Right now. No second chances. And honestly, he exhaled. You deserve it. Nathan's heart sank. But, Tom continued, his voice shifting, firing you won't teach you anything. It'd be too easy. And frankly, I don't believe in easy lessons. Nathan's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Tom studied him for a long moment. Then finally he said, "I'm not firing you, but I'm demoting you." Nathan's stomach twisted. "Demoting me?" Tom nodded. "You're going to start over. As a busboy." Nathan's face went pale. "You'll clean tables," Tom continued. "You'll pick up plates, refill glasses, take out the trash." His eyes sharpened. "And you'll learn what it's like to serve, truly serve." Nathan's pride rebelled. "You can't." "I can," Tom said firmly. "And I just did." Silence. Nathan's throat tightened. He had spent years climbing the ranks in fine dining. And now, he was being sent back to square one. But deep down, he knew he had no one to blame but himself. Nathan stood frozen, staring at Tom Cruise, his mind racing. A busboy? It was a humiliation worse than being fired. A complete undoing of everything he had built for himself at the Crystal Ember. He had spent years working his way up, building a reputation as one of the best waiters in the city. And now, he was being sent to the bottom. Tom's gaze remained steady. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't angry. But he was dead serious. Nathan's jaw tightened. His first instinct was to fight back, to refuse. "I don't deserve this. I was just doing my job." But deep down, a painful truth gnawed at him. This wasn't just about tonight. This was about who he had become. A man who had spent years looking down on others. A man who only respected wealth and status. A man who, if the roles had been reversed, wouldn't have given someone like himself a second chance. And yet, Tom Cruise was giving him one. Nathan swallowed his pride. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Tom leaned back, arms crossed. "As long as it takes for you to understand what real service means." Nathan's stomach twisted, but he nodded. It wasn't like he had a choice. The first lesson the next evening, Nathan stood at the back of the restaurant, wearing a crisp busboy uniform, a plain black button-up and an apron. Gone was his polished waiter's suit. Gone was the power he once wielded over the staff. Now he was the one cleaning tables, fetching water and scrubbing down silverware. And no one let him forget it. The same junior waiters he had once talked down to now gave him knowing smirks. The kitchen staff, who he had always ignored, watched with amusement as he rushed back and forth, picking up used dishes. Ben, the young waiter who had spoken up against him, walked past and patted his shoulder. "You missed a spot." Nathan gritted his teeth but said nothing. For the first time in his career, he couldn't talk his way out of this. He just had to do the work. A moment of humility later that night, as the restaurant wound down, Nathan found himself wiping down a table near the back. His hands ached. His feet throbbed. He had spent years ordering people around, dismissing their effort like it was easy. But now, after just one shift, he realized something painful. He had never actually worked as hard as he thought he had. He had taken everything for granted. And now he was at the bottom, seeing the restaurant from a completely new perspective. A deep shame settled in his chest. How many people had he treated like dirt just because they weren't wearing designer suits? How many customers had he judged unfairly? Nathan set the rag down and exhaled deeply. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about money. He was thinking about what kind of person he had become. And for the first time, he didn't like what he saw. Tom's final words as Nathan finished cleaning. He turned toward the entrance. Tom was there, watching. Nathan froze, unsure what to say. Tom gave a small nod. "Tough first shift." Nathan let out a breath. "Yeah." Tom studied him for a long moment. Then he said, "This isn't about punishing you, Nathan." Nathan's fingers tightened around the rag in his hand. "I know," he admitted. "I needed this." Tom's lips curved into a small smile. "Good. Then maybe you'll walk away from this place with more than just restaurant experience." Nathan swallowed the lump in his throat and nodded. For the first time, he wasn't just listening to Tom Cruise. He was learning. Weeks passed. Nathan Parker, once one of the most arrogant waiters at the Crystal Ember, was now a changed man. At first he had resisted. The humiliation of being demoted to a busboy had been crushing. But the more he worked, the more he began to see. He saw the exhaustion on the faces of the kitchen staff, the ones he had once ignored. He saw the stress of the young waiters like Ben, who tried so hard to impress guests, but rarely received appreciation. And most of all, he saw his old self in other customers, The way some of them sneered at him, dismissing him like he didn't exist. And every time that happened, he felt a sting of regret. Because he finally understood. One evening, after a particularly difficult shift, Nathan was wiping down the last few tables when he heard a familiar voice. "I'll take a table by the kitchen." Nathan froze. It was Tom. Nathan turned slowly, but Tom wasn't smirking or testing him. He was just smiling. A real smile. Nathan swallowed, then took a steady breath. "Sir," he said, standing taller than he had in weeks. "Let me get you a better table." Tom's smile widened. "Now that's more like it." Nathan led him to one of the best seats in the restaurant. He pulled the chair out respectfully, placed the menu in front of him, and said, "I'll send over our best waiter to take care of you." Tom nodded, pleased. "You've learned a lot, haven't you?" Nathan exhaled, a small, almost sheepish smile forming. "More than I ever thought I needed to." Tom studied him for a moment before saying, "It's never too late to be better." Nathan felt those words this time. And for the first time in his life, he truly believed them. A new beginning. A few months later, Nathan was offered a chance to return to his role as a senior waiter. But this time, he wasn't the same man. He treated every guest with respect. He valued the team around him. And he no longer measured people by their clothes, their wallets, or their status. Because he had finally learned the lesson Tom Cruise had been trying to teach him all along. Respect isn't about who has the most money. It's about how you treat people when you think they have nothing to offer you. And with that, Nathan Parker had finally become someone worth respecting. The end.